I want to start with a story. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and I was sitting across from someone I trusted or thought I trusted. I had one of those moments where your soul feels like it's unraveling. You know what I'm talking about? That aching need to let it all out before it swallows you whole. So I shared laid it all bare. I want to start with a story. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and I was sitting across from someone I trusted or thought I trusted. I had one of those moments where your soul feels like it's unraveling. You know what I'm talking about? That aching need to let it all out before it swallows you whole. So I shared laid it all bare. And you know what I got back? A half-hearted nod, a glance at their phone. And then silence. I remember leaving that conversation feeling heavier than when I'd walked in. Because sometimes when we tell people our problems, what we're really doing is handing them our raw edges, hoping they'll smooth them out. But what if they don't? What if they can't? That moment sat with me. It didn't just sit. It lingered, tugging at my thoughts like an unfinished sentence. I replayed it over and over, like maybe if I analyzed it enough, I'd find the missing piece. Did I say too much? Was I too dramatic? Did they care at all? Or worse, did they care, but just not enough to wade into the mess with me? The truth is, it wasn't their reaction that hurt the most. It was the sudden realization that I had expected something from them that they weren't equipped to give. And that's the part no one warns you about, the aftermath of opening yourself up and feeling like all you did was bleed out in front of someone who didn't know how to stop the bleeding. It's a lonely feeling, isn't it? That sinking sense that maybe your pain is too much, too complicated, too loud for someone else to handle. And so we do one of two things. We either double down and keep talking, hoping that if we say it in just the right way, they'll finally get it. Or we shrink back, promising ourselves we won't make the same mistake again. I don't think either of those responses is wrong. I think they're human. Because here's the thing: when we're hurting, what we're really looking for is connection. We don't just want to be heard, we want to be held. Emotionally, spiritually, maybe even physically. But sometimes in that search for connection, we forget something important. Not everyone is capable of holding us the way we need to be held. Not everyone is ready for the weight of our words. And when we offer up those fragile, broken parts of ourselves without considering who's on the receiving end, we risk not just being misunderstood, but being dismissed. And that kind of dismissal, it stings. It leaves scars. It teaches us to guard ourselves more tightly, to build walls instead of bridges, and to carry our struggles like secrets rather than stories. But maybe, just maybe, the real problem isn't that we share too much. Maybe it's that we share too soon. I think back to that Tuesday afternoon, and what strikes me now is how unprepared I was for the silence that followed my words. I expected comfort, advice, maybe even a hug. But what I didn't expect, what I didn't prepare for, was the possibility that I might leave that conversation feeling emptier than when I started. And isn't that what we fear the most? That if we open up, we might not just be vulnerable, we might be exposed, laid bare with no armor and no backup plan. And sometimes the fear of that exposure keeps us silent, even when we desperately want to speak. But here's what I learned that day: silence doesn't always mean indifference. Sometimes silence is just discomfort. And discomfort isn't about us, it's about the other person's inability to step into the space we've created. So maybe the question we need to ask ourselves isn't whether we should share our problems at all. Maybe the question is who has earned the right to hear them. Because not everyone is meant to hold our truths. Not everyone is equipped to help us carry our burdens. And sometimes the bravest thing we can do isn't to speak, it's to wait. Wait until the words feel less like wounds and more like wisdom. Wait until we're ready not just to share our struggles, but to shape them into something that heals rather than hurts. I think that's what I missed on that Tuesday afternoon. I wasn't ready. And maybe the person sitting across from me wasn't ready either. But that moment taught me something I'll never forget: sharing isn't about dumping your pain on someone else. It's about inviting them into your story, and not everyone is meant to be part of that chapter. And the truth is, sometimes the best thing we can do isn't to tell people our problems. It's to sit with them long enough that when we do decide to share, we're not just looking for someone to carry the weight, we're showing them how we carried it ourselves. We've all been there, haven't we? Searching for someone to tell us, you're right, it's hard. I see you. It's that deep longing for validation, for someone else to recognize our pain and tell us we're not alone. It's a universal need, isn't it? We want to feel understood, to have our struggles acknowledged, to be told that it's okay to be in the middle of something messy and uncertain. And of course, that's natural. It's part of being human. But here's the thing: when we depend on other people's reactions to validate our struggles, we give them power over our healing. And let's be honest, most people don't know what to do with that power. They offer advice when we need silence. They offer solutions when we need empathy. Or worse, they give us the I get it face, but their eyes are already scanning the room, waiting for the next topic to surface. This is a painful reality. We look to others for support, but instead of feeling validated, we often feel minimized or misunderstood. It's like reaching for a lifeline and finding that it's just out of reach, slipping through our fingers. Instead of lifting us up, it drags us down deeper into the fear that maybe we're not worthy of the help we're seeking. What if, instead of searching for external validation, we could learn to validate ourselves? What if we could look inside, sit with our pain, and say, I see you, I hear you. I will hold you until you are ready to move through this. Because that's the truth. Validation from others doesn't heal the wound, it just puts a temporary bandage on it. You see, it's easy to mistake validation for healing. We think that if someone just acknowledges our pain in the right way, we'll feel better. But validation doesn't remove the discomfort, it just gives us a momentary respite from it. It's like trying to soothe a bruise with a quick compliment or a simple "let's go get better." The hurt doesn't go away just because someone else acknowledges it, it simply lingers, waiting to be addressed with real care. I've come to realize that what we need most is not external reassurance, but internal strength. And that strength doesn't come from telling people our problems over and over again, hoping they'll give us the comfort we're seeking. It comes from learning how to sit with the discomfort of our struggles, how to allow ourselves the time to feel the pain fully. And then, when we're ready, how to take action on what we've learned. But here's the catch. We often look for validation because we don't trust ourselves to handle the pain alone. We've been conditioned to believe that healing is a communal effort, that someone else must help us fix what is broken. And while there's nothing wrong with asking for support, there's a big difference between asking for help and relying on others to take the weight of our emotional baggage. So, what if we reframe the idea of validation? What if instead of seeing it as something we get from others, we saw it as something we give ourselves? What if we started validating our own strength, recognizing our resilience even in the midst of hardship, and giving ourselves permission to feel what we feel without needing anyone else to confirm it? It's a radical shift, but it's also a liberating one. Because when we start validating ourselves, we begin to stop looking for others to fix us. We stop placing our emotional well-being in the hands of people who may not understand us or may not be in a position to give us the empathy we need. And we start realizing that we too have the ability to heal. Think about it: when you start truly validating your own emotions, when you stop seeking constant reassurance and begin to trust your own journey, you become less dependent on others for your sense of self-worth. You begin to understand that your struggles don't define you, they refine you. And in that space, you can allow others to enter your world, not as saviors, but as witnesses to your strength and growth. In the end, validation is a gift we give ourselves. It's the permission to be imperfect, to feel deeply, and to trust that, even in the mess, we are capable of rising. Because the truth is, no one can heal us but ourselves. We may need others to support us, to walk alongside us, but ultimately, the power to heal and grow lies within .st. What do we do instead? We sit with it, we feel it, not in a way that drowns us, but in a way that teaches us. I remember a time in my life when I felt completely overwhelmed. It wasn't one specific thing, it was a buildup of small, seemingly insignificant moments that together felt like a tidal wave crashing over me. I wanted to scream, I wanted to hide, I wanted someone to fix it. But instead, I sat with it. I let myself feel every painful emotion: the frustration, the sadness, the anger, and even the confusion. It wasn't easy. It wasn't comfortable. But I knew that if I didn't sit with those feelings, they would control me. They would become a story that I would tell myself over and over, one that would define who I was. So I sat and I felt. There's a saying I've heard many times: what you resist persists. It's true. I had spent so much of my life running from discomfort, avoiding the tough stuff, hoping it would just go away if I ignored it long enough. But the truth is, running only makes it grow louder. Our pain doesn't disappear when we look away, it only gets stronger. And often it comes out in ways we don't expect. We snap at loved ones. We lose our patience. We withdraw from people. And all the while, we're pretending that everything is fine, that the pain isn't there. But it is. It's always there, quietly waiting for us to acknowledge it. So I made a choice to stop resisting. I chose to sit with my discomfort, to lean into it, to let it wash over me instead of trying to control it. And that's when something powerful started to happen. The pain didn't swallow me. It didn't overpower me. Instead, it became a part of me. I began to understand the lessons within it, the wisdom that was hidden in the ache. I realized that each moment of discomfort was a signal, a messenger, telling me where I needed to heal, what I needed to learn, and where I was being called to grow. It wasn't always clear at first. It wasn't like I immediately found a neat little lesson wrapped up in a bow. But over time, the more I allowed myself to sit with my pain, the more I started to see the patterns, the deeper understanding of who I was and what I needed to let go of in order to move forward. There were no shortcuts, no easy fixes. But sitting with the discomfort, letting it be there without judgment or shame helped me begin to process it instead of pushing it away. This is what I mean when I say we need to transform our pain into power. Pain in and of itself doesn't define us. It doesn't make us weak or broken. Pain is just a messenger. But it's up to us how we respond. We can either let it consume us or we can use it as a catalyst for growth. Think about a sculptor with a block of marble. The marble in its natural state is just a mass of stone. But the sculptor doesn't try to make the marble smooth all at once. Instead, they chip away at it, carefully and intentionally, allowing the shape to emerge over time. They work with the material, not against it. And that's what we can do with our pain. Instead of running from it, we can begin to work with it, chipping away at the parts of us that no longer serve us. This is where true resilience comes from, our ability to sit with our struggles and learn from them, not just survive them. Resilience isn't about ignoring the pain or pushing through it at all costs. It's about allowing ourselves to feel deeply, to sit with the discomfort, and then to rise with newfound strength and wisdom. I've learned that the more we try to avoid pain, the more it controls us. But when we embrace it, when we make the choice to sit with it rather than run, it loses its power over us. It doesn't disappear, but it becomes something we can move through rather than something that moves us. And in that space, we begin to discover the incredible capacity we have for growth. It's in that quiet, sometimes uncomfortable place where we find the courage to change, to rise above, and to create a new path forward. We start to see that our struggles are not something to be ashamed of or hidden away. They are part of our stories of resilience, stories of strength, stories of transformation. When we allow ourselves to sit with our pain instead of rushing to get rid of it, we uncover the beauty of what comes after. The pain, the struggle becomes a foundation upon which we build something stronger, something truer to who we are meant to be. And that, my friends, is the real power, the power that comes from owning our pain, from transforming it into wisdom, and from using it to move forward into the life we are meant to live. Now, don't get me wrong. Vulnerability is powerful, but only in the right spaces. One of the most important lessons I've learned in my life is that vulnerability isn't about oversharing. It's not about dumping our emotional burdens on anyone who will listen. It's not about exposing our deepest wounds to every passerby who crosses our path. No, vulnerability is a sacred act. It's a gift that should be given with discernment. We've all been there. You're sitting in a room with someone, and you can feel the tension, the weight of something unsaid. There's a part of you that wants to share, that wants to open up, that wants to let the other person in. But then something holds you back. Maybe it's a gut feeling, or maybe it's experience telling you to hold your cards close. And thank God for that voice. That's the voice that keeps you safe, that reminds you that not every person deserves access to your heart, to your pain, or to your story. It's a reminder that not every person is equipped to hold the weight of your vulnerability. There's a difference between being vulnerable and being exposed. Being vulnerable means being open and honest about who you are, what you've been through, and how you feel while still maintaining control over your narrative. It means being authentic without the expectation of a certain reaction. Exposing yourself, on the other hand, can feel like giving up control. It's opening up to anyone and everyone without considering whether they are emotionally capable of handling your truth. It's like walking out into a storm without the proper clothing, without protection. And when we expose ourselves to the wrong people, we often find ourselves feeling more exposed than ever, emotionally drained, and vulnerable in a way that doesn't empower us, but rather leaves us feeling weak and unprotected. The right audience matters because they are the ones who have earned the privilege of seeing us at our rawest. These are the people who have walked alongside us, who know our history, who can hold our truth with care and respect. These are the ones who don't try to fix us, but simply sit with us, offering presence, not solutions. They understand that vulnerability is not about fixing or solving, but about witnessing and supporting. And in that space, something transformative happens. It's important to recognize that the people who deserve access to your inner world are those who can hold space for it. They aren't there to judge, to minimize, or to offer empty advice. They are there to listen, to understand, and to walk beside you without the pressure to make it better. These people don't react out of discomfort. When you open up, they don't look away or avoid your pain. Instead, they lean in, letting you feel seen and heard without trying to change anything. That's when vulnerability is at its most powerful. I've come to realize that vulnerability isn't a one-size-fits-all experience. It's not a thing to be shared indiscriminately or in every relationship. There are spaces where vulnerability can blossom and spaces where it can wither, suffocated by misunderstanding or ill-intended advice. The key is knowing when to share with whom and why. Sharing our struggles and our truths is an act of trust, and not everyone has earned that trust. And when we share with those who haven't earned it, the very act of opening ourselves up can leave us feeling exposed, like a raw nerve, vulnerable to the indifference or judgment of others. For me, it's been about learning the balance. It's about being discerning with who I share my deepest thoughts and emotions with, and who I simply enjoy company with. I've learned that just because someone is present in my life doesn't mean they deserve the keys to my heart. Some people are just meant to enjoy the surface level moments, and that's okay. Not everyone needs to know the struggles I carry. Not everyone needs to hear the things I haven't fully processed yet. I've also learned that being selective with my vulnerability doesn't make me cold or distant, it makes me wise. It's not about building walls, it's about building boundaries. It's about knowing that some people are there to help carry the load, and others are there just to walk beside me, offering companionship without trying to take over the journey. I've come to value the people who can listen and not immediately offer a fix. Those who can hold space for me, who can sit in the discomfort of silence, knowing that sometimes the most healing thing is not to say anything at all, but to simply be present. And in those moments of true connection, where vulnerability is met with understanding, there is a beauty that blooms. It's a quiet beauty, a strength that comes not from fixing, but from being. And that's when we realize that vulnerability, when shared with the right people, isn't a weakness at all. It's a form of courage. It's a way of saying, I trust you with my truth. And in that trust, we allow ourselves to grow stronger. The right audience doesn't take our strength away, they help amplify it. So when you choose to share, choose wisely. Be mindful of where you pour your energy, where you place your trust. Not every person needs to know your struggles. Not every person can hold them, but the ones who can, they are worth their weight in gold. They are the ones who will walk beside you, not as saviors, but as witnesses to your strength and resilience. And in their presence, you will find that your vulnerability becomes a source of power. There's something incredibly freeing about understanding that not everyone is meant to hear your story. In fact, the more we share, the more we risk losing ourselves to the reactions of others. We're constantly navigating the delicate balance between being open and protecting our inner world. And yet, when we share too much too soon or with the wrong person, it can feel like we've handed over the pieces of ourselves that are still fragile, still healing, still uncertain. It's a fine line, isn't it? We want connection, we want empathy, but we also need space to grow and process without the pressure of others' expectations or judgments. This is where the concept of discernment becomes essential. We need to recognize that while our story is important, not everyone is ready to hear it, and not everyone deserves access to the vulnerable parts of ourselves. It's a realization that stings a little at first, but it's also incredibly empowering. Because when we keep our most intimate stories and struggles close, we take back control. We begin to understand that we are the gatekeepers of our own emotional landscape. We decide who gets to be part of our journey and who doesn't. And let's be clear, there's no shame in protecting your energy. It's not about being secretive or closed off, but about safeguarding what's precious. Just like we wouldn't share the keys to our house with a stranger, we shouldn't hand over the keys to our emotional world without considering who is worthy of that trust. Vulnerability is not a free-for-all. It's a deliberate choice, and sometimes that means holding back and protecting your heart until you find someone who is capable of meeting you where you are, with the understanding and care that your story deserves. I think a lot of us get caught up in the idea that if we just share more, we'll be understood. We hope that by opening up, someone will be able to offer us the insight, advice, or comfort we're desperately seeking. But here's the truth. Not everyone has the capacity to hold your pain, to sit with the rawness of your emotions without running for the hills. And that's okay. It doesn't mean they don't care or that they don't love you. It just means they aren't in a place where they can fully understand or support you in the way you need. There's a kind of peace that comes with realizing this. When you stop seeking validation from everyone and anyone, you start to become more selective about where you invest your emotional energy. You no longer feel the need to explain yourself or justify your pain. You learn that your feelings are valid, even if someone else doesn't see them or understand them the way you do. You learn to trust your own process, your own healing, and recognize that it's not anyone's job but your own to carry your burdens. And when you stop sharing with everyone, you'll start to notice something incredible. You begin to attract people who understand you on a deeper level. Those who respect your boundaries, who don't ask for more than you are willing to give, and who don't rush to fill the space with empty words. These are the people who know that silence sometimes speaks louder than words, and who have the capacity to just be with you in the moments when you need it most. They don't need to fix anything. They just need to show up. They need to offer presence, not advice, because they understand that healing isn't about doing, it's about being. So when you begin to choose carefully who gets to hear your story, you also begin to choose who gets to witness your growth. And that's powerful, because the right people can help you see your own strength. They can mirror back to you the resilience you might not even know you have. They can help you move through the difficult moments without making you feel small or broken. Instead, they make you feel whole even when you're in the midst of a struggle. They help you hold your pain without carrying it for you. And in that shared space, you'll begin to realize that vulnerability isn't a weakness. It's a powerful act of trust, a courageous step toward healing, and an invitation for the right people to show up in ways that make you feel seen and heard. But even more than that, choosing who hears your story allows you to honor yourself. It allows you to respect the sacredness of your experiences, your emotions, and your healing process. Not everyone is worthy of your vulnerability, and that's a lesson we all need to learn. It's about reclaiming your power, about knowing that you are not obligated to share every part of yourself with others. Instead, you get to decide when, how, and with whom you share the parts of yourself that are still healing, still raw, still in need of care. Because when you choose wisely, vulnerability becomes an act of strength, not surrender.